This is the complete lore of Welcome Home. With 2024 coming to a close, a new year upon us, and some new updates on the horizon, I thought it would be a good idea to look back over this weird and wonderful artistic series to remind ourselves of everything we've learned about the mysterious neighborhood known as home. Plus, there have been a few updates since our last theory. So grab some hot cocoa and settle into that comfy chair, neighbor. Here is everything you need to know about Welcome Home. Plus, if you stick around to the end, there may just be something special waiting for you. Call it a little holiday gift from me. Matt, take it away.
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood.
A beautiful day
for a neighbor.
Would you be mine?
Could you be mine? Would you be mine?
Could you be mine? Would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor?
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show that hopes to make this day a special day by just being itself. And you can make my day very special by gently and kindly tapping that subscribe button. You know, that original quote is nothing short of iconic. Attributed to one man in particular, Fred Rogers, host of the show Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. No single man has done so much for children's entertainment or red-knit cardigan sweaters. I think it's fairly safe to say that every kid who grew up between 1968 and 2001 are at least passingly familiar with his work. An educational show hosted on PBS that encouraged respect, compassion, kindness, integrity, and humility. It was simple, it was heartwarming, and it became one of the longest running kids shows of all time, bested only by Sesame Street in 2003. But when you make an impact on kids' lives, inevitably something strange happens when those kids grow up. They begin to explore their nostalgia, but they give it a new twist to transform it into something original. And nowhere else is that more true than here on the internet, where everything gets thrown into the pop culture grinder to be remixed and melted together until something inevitably pops out at the other end. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's evil, and sometimes it's Welcome Home, the latest spooky craze to capture the imagination of the internet. If this hasn't been flooding your content feed lately, I'd be surprised. It has been everywhere, and for good reason. The premise behind it all is that this is a website dedicated to recovering pieces of lost media from an old 70s show called, fittingly enough, Welcome Home, a kids' educational series that suddenly went off the air and disappeared. Even its production company went completely silent. In that way, it's very reminiscent of Hello Puppets, if you happen to remember that one. As we explore the website, we can learn more about the residents of the neighborhood called Home. And it's your typical children's edutainment roster. People like Grumpy Frank, Joyful Julie, Goofy but streetwise Barnaby. But the most important character is the lead, Wally darling. A character who's one part Mr. Rogers, one part Sesame Street, and with just a dash of Bob Ross thrown in, because the internet do what the internet gonna do. Exploring the website, we learned that episodes of the show would revolve around Wally learning a lesson, going on adventures, and drawing and painting with viewers. It all sounds quite idyllic, really. And it is, at least until you look beneath the surface. As you explore the website, you get a sense that not everything is right in this neighborhood. Links don't seem to work as they should, text appears to be overlapping, out of alignment, or hidden entirely, and there's this weird image of Wally just looking mighty sus.
That's not sinister at all.
There he is.
Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't just a website, it's an ARG, an artfully realized gallery full of drawings, cardboard models, vinyl records, a physical puppet, and of course, puzzles. Lots of puzzles. And they're all hiding a suspicious amount of lore. Something sinister is going on in this neighborhood, and we're about to figure out what it is. But before I dive in, I do want to take a minute to remind everyone that while yes, websites with secrets like this are exciting, we have to be kind and respectful while we explore. Welcome Home's creator Clown has been very explicit in saying that they welcome theorizing, but they also ask that you don't share them on any theory videos for fear of the video influencing their intended narrative. Additionally, as always with any website-based mystery, remember our 5 rules that we've covered in past episodes. Never publish private information, stick to publicly available information, do not trespass, do not contact or harass individuals, and keep the discussion centralized. To help with that, there's going to be a link in the description for the mega thread on the Game Theorists subreddit. But these rules are especially true for this particular series. Rumors have been circulating in the community that Clown has actually been doxxed. Fortunately, they put out a post confirming that that isn't true. That said, let's just keep it that way. Secondly, as I mentioned before, online discussion about this world and its characters has blown up across TikTok and YouTube. And because of how quickly and aggressively this has gained in popularity, popularity, Clown's currently taken a step back from posting and creating right now. There's even a deleted post saying how overwhelmed they feel by the amount of attention the project's received. So just as a reminder, stay patient, stay polite, and do not pressure anyone into making more content. Be kind and respectful members of the community. And Clown, if you're watching, which you shouldn't be since this is a theory video, but still, if you are, just want to say, take your time. There is absolutely zero pressure for you to make anything anytime soon. I mean, let's be honest, it took me 7 years to finally launch Style Theory. Creating something cool takes time. One creator to another, just keep doing what you're doing and put your own mental health first. All right, so with all of us on the same page, let's actually look at some of the clues that I mentioned earlier. When you visit the homepage, you'll find Wally sitting on a rock, and below him is a newsletter explaining the latest updates. However, if you look closely, you'll see something that's quite literally out of place. The letter Y in the word your is sitting much higher than the rest of the text. Now, you might think that this is just a website glitch, something that the creator didn't realize was there, but when you look through the rest of the site, you find the same thing happening over and over again. One misplaced letter on practically every main page. The W in Wally on the welcome homepage is slightly too low. There's an X in the word expand on the neighborhood page, an O in the title of the about us page, an E in the news logo, and a V in the I love you message over in the guest book. What do you do with all these letters? Well, you go back up to the URL bar and type in clownillustration.com/ and then the letters YWXOEV. That then brings you to a brand new page that contains the image of a house with a gif of eyes over top. These eyes appear to be that of our lead character, Wally. Eventually, the gif stops, showing only an image of his eyes wide open with dilated pupils staring right at us, which I gotta say is making me all sorts of uncomfortable, but this isn't the only secret that those letters unlock. Notice the title tab of the website here. It says try again. Clearly, there are right and wrong combinations of all these letters. By putting in WOXYVE, we get to see a page of the show's script, along with a gif that shows Wally's eyes looking at us. And if you try EOVWXY, you'll see a video of a TV screen with static, but when the 40-second mark hits, suddenly there's a flash of those same eyes staring at us through the screen. Something tells me we're being watched. And it's at this moment that you notice the designs at the edges of the website. What initially seems like loud flower power style designs of the 60s are actually a mass of eyes, constantly watching us as we scroll through the website's various pages. But this doesn't end with it just watching us. Whatever this thing is, it's also trying to communicate with us. On the welcome homepage, we find lots of images that are noted as being restored remnants and reproduced pieces. This is where we find that creepy image of Wally closing his window shutters, but there's also another image that's of interest here. There's what appears to be a newspaper clipping with a scene of the characters Frank and Eddie delivering mail. However, if you look closely, you'll see part of the article is visible on the right-hand side. Take an even closer look, and you'll notice at the bottom, the first letters of each line spell out something. Hello, you. Haha, that's ominous. Who's speaking to us exactly? It's also not the only time that we see messages like this either. If you head on over to the About Us page, the page where we learn about the recreation efforts, we can see a picture of Frank's head mechanics. But in the corner of that image is a set of books, all with writing on the spine. The first couple are obvious, and again give off that creepy vibe of something trying to communicate with us. Hello, it's you know who. But it's the last books that really get into uncomfortable territory. They read, I'm your neighbor. Do you know about me? You do. I've seen you. So we know someone's watching us. We know they're trying to communicate with us, but who are they? They assume that we know them, so we should probably figure out who's on the other side of those book spines. Feels very much like someone from the show in some way, calling us neighbor. It's very Mr. Rogers-esque, like a TV host addressing the people that are watching, breaking the fourth wall YouTube style. Could it be that the reason that we saw the eyes of Wally on those mysterious pages was because he's the one trying to communicate with us? Well, the only way to know for sure is to keep on searching, and I want to go all the way to the end, to the page that's filled with probably the most lore of this entire project, the guest book. This guest book is for people visiting the site to leave comments, but that's not the only thing the page displays. Sometimes there are drawings next to those comments which aren't made by regular users like you and me. Someone, or something, has drawn them on the page. Most likely the one who's been watching us this entire time. And this is where things start to get even cooler. Sure, having even more pictures of eyeballs drawn next to comments is unsettling, but that's not all they're doing. If you open the image in a new tab, you'll find almost all of them have interesting file names. For example, on page 3, there's a spiral drawn in red, yellow, and blue crayon next to a comment that asks, why do you like eye contact? And if you open that image up in a new tab, you find the response, so you will know I am looking at you, neighbor. I am talking to you. So whoever's drawn these images is definitely connected to everything else that's been going on around here. So who is it? Well, we get clues to that answer throughout the rest of the guest book. For instance, there's one comment that says, Wally's my favorite, to which the website drawings reply, I am your favorite too. Awfully presumptuous of you there, mystery host. So we know that Wally and this character aren't one and the same, except maybe they are. In another comment that says, I hope Wally knows that he's my favorite, the title tab says, I'm your favorite, that makes me happy. So are you or are you not Wally? Well, it seems like the answer may actually be yes and no. When you go to the last page of the guest book, you're presented with a lot of blank entries, which I don't know about you, but feels awfully suspicious. So if you hit select all, in one of those empty guest book entries, it suddenly reveals that there's hidden text here from Wally that reads, you're looking for me, silly. But right next to it is another entry, also credited to Wally, except this time it's like somebody wrote his name and then put it through a SpongeBob meme filter. It says, you won't write back. The fact that both of these are identifying as Wally, just with one of them corrupted, it seems to indicate that there are either two entities inside our beloved host, or there are two Wallys running around. The real Wally and something else. But what? Well, at the bottom of each webpage, all the characters sign their name, each with a unique signature. But to borrow a phrase from a rival kids show, one of these things is not like the other. Or should I say, two of these things are actually exactly like the other. Notice how the writing for home is the same as the handwriting for Wally. Same red crayon, same style of writing, especially when you compare the M and the W. Wally and home are connected in some way. They seem to be one and the same. This is also heavily supported by another one of the guestbook pages. On page 5, one comment says that Wally is such a doll, and the website's response is a picture of an eye titled, no, a puppet. It's a double meaning. Not only is Wally the character a physical puppet, but he seems to be getting puppeteered by something else behind the scenes pulling the strings. Whoever or whatever home is supposed to be. There are a lot of other messages hidden throughout the guestbook, and I'd encourage you to go and check them out, but I figured I'd try somewhere else to see if it would yield different results, and lo and behold, my hunch was correct. This site is hiding a ton of information in very unique places. On the Neighborhood page, you can actually click on the houses to learn about each of the characters. Each one gets themselves an illustration and then a page on the right with their key character traits. However, if you do what I tend to do with these types of mysteries and just click on everything in sight in the hopes of finding clues, you'll actually be rewarded. If you happen to click on the word you in the word your at the top of the page, you'll be taken to a brand new screen. One that has a description card like all the other characters, only this time it has you. Yes, you, the one watching. And you got yourself a single line in your description, Wally is your best friend. I don't know, that, along with the constant calling of people in the guestbook neighbor, it's kind of giving me vibes of a cult, where everyone refers to each other as brothers and sisters, or in this case, neighbors, rather than by their actual names. Speaking of weird details in the character descriptions, all of these characters, minus Wally, don't originate from home. They all moved here from somewhere else. They all have friends and family. We even see a picture of Julie and her siblings elsewhere on the site, but they don't exist inside of home, which again, gives me some creepy cult vibes, where members are encouraged to abandon their former lives and move to live with other cult members in a closed-off community. And given that Wally is the one that never had to move, my gut's telling me that he's the one in charge. And my gut seems to be right. As I looked through more and more of the images on the welcome page, I noticed one very specific and tiny detail. The characters all wear badges, pins, or cufflinks related to their personality and traits. Some are pretty darn obvious. Eddie has a male pin on his hat because he's a mailman. Sally has a star and moon pin on her because she is literally a star. But what about dear old Wally? I expected to see him with some kind of art-based pin, a paintbrush, easel, crayon, but those were nowhere to be found. Instead, there are two images on the website that show what cufflinks Wally's wearing, and they're pretty surprising. He's wearing crosses, which doesn't really feel all that thematic for a character who's a painter. Instead, that's the sort of thing that you get out of a religious leader, a vibe that starts to get even stronger if you go back to the earliest days of the website. Now, this website was first launched back in February of 2022, and back then, it looked very different than it does today. At one point, there was this image of Wally staring directly at us with a simple phrase above his head, hold my gaze and follow me. I don't know about you, but if Mr. Rogers started speaking to me that way, I'd be catching the first trolley on out of here. No, this sort of phrasing is very similar to the style of speech used by religious figures, especially Jesus from various passages throughout the Bible where he would ask his disciples to follow him. It's also a tactic used by cult leaders as they indoctrinate new members. But bringing it all back around to the current website, if you visit that neighborhood page that I mentioned earlier and take an even closer look, you might notice that Wally's house has this pulsating black goo coming out from underneath it. And with internet projects like these, we all know that black goo is never a good sign. To my surprise, that space below the house was clickable. So I clicked it and I got this, a black image of Wally drawn in red, kneeling before the eye of his house with one hand raised. I mean, this is the most creepy thing that we've come across so far, and it gets even creepier because the title tab text is listed as so below. If those two words don't immediately ring alarm bells for you, that's fine. To me though, as someone who's done his fair share of weird internet research, that phrase always leads to one thing. It's actually half of a phrase that you see a lot, as above, so below. A phrase that's usually used in conjunction with occult practices. Not just any practices sources either. More often than not, the phrase is associated with one particular image of the deity Baphomet. Baphomet was worshipped as a deity by groups like the Knights Templar and represented balance, with the two-finger salutes pointing up and down, hence as above, so below. It's a symbol of mercy and justice, as well as explaining the idea that if things are a certain way in the heavens, so shall they be down here on Earth. And fun fact, if you take a look at Clown's professional art page, there's actually an image of Wally pulling the exact same pose. Now, it's at this point that I should probably mention that all the stuff on that particular website isn't considered canon by Clown. Quote, everything outside of the website, especially anything prior to the beginning of January of 2022, is conceptual artwork. These items are not solidified any longer, such as Wally's cufflinks, which no longer adorns crosses on the outside. So I would not regard these very old pieces as anything to consider. Welcome Home has been completely overhauled since then. So that Baphomet image is definitely not canon, but it does seem like some of these ideas have persevered throughout the various updates of the website, hence that other image still being titled So Below despite various website updates. I've also seen comments saying that this statement disproves any sort of religious or cult theory, but looking at these words from Clown, which are the only comments that I could find related to this particular topic, I don't think that's actually what they're saying. So back to As Above, So Below. Baphomet wasn't only depicted in that one pose, he was also regularly depicted with children surrounding him, because the idea was that children wouldn't immediately see him as the devil. They should be allowed to make their own decisions rather than being told how to interpret something. Specifically, the worshippers of Baphomet were against the indoctrination of children, which is pretty darn interesting if Wally is now fulfilling the role as some sort of puppet deity. In short, all of this seems to imply that just like Baphomet represented balance, Wally and Home also balance each other out. Wally is the friendly childhood host, and Home is the darkly chaotic, perhaps even evil monster lurking within. On the About Us page, we see some of the artwork that's being received from an anonymous source, but the original artwork always arrives in a damaged state, covered in red, yellow, and blue paint, the colors that Wally uses. Again, showing us that this isn't just a show, but that the real puppet of Wally is alive and purposely trying to reach out to us. On that same page, there's an FAQ section where there's some text that overlaps. Text that reads, when I unwrapped the first letter, I felt it. I heard it. Open, open, open. I want it out. I'm going to get it out. What does he mean, get it out? Are you talking about home? We see the same type of language on the news page, where we're told that a museum curator is wanting to put on an exhibition for all these findings. Together, we will get it out. We will get everything out. You will see as we do, neighbor. Now that right there, that sounds like indoctrination at its finest. Wally has managed to brainwash these people. And now, thanks to this exhibition, they're going to be able to spread the word of this show, this cult, to the masses. The links page, for instance, is literally labeled as spread the good word. The doctrine of Wally. But what exactly is Wally's doctrine? On the surface, thanks to that Baphomet imagery, you might think that Wally is both a deity and leader, but I don't think that's the case. As we've talked about multiple times now, Home appears to be alive, and it's considered the 9th neighbor of Welcome Home. None of the other houses in this neighborhood are alive, it's just Home. And given that it's Wally's house and he's some kind of a cult leader, that strikes me as fairly suspicious, especially when you check out the page on your phone. Because the image has to be resized for a mobile device, Home is no longer in the middle of the page. It's higher, and as a result, you see what's behind it. A black void with a single spiral in the middle, just like the spirals that Wally is drawing into the guest book. And while that is certainly disturbing, look at the whole image. The colorful trees in the middle, the paths leading to and from the void and all around the neighborhood. It almost looks like a person lifting their arms in an act of worship. Wally isn't the deity here, Home is. Wally is just the good and faithful servant. They are all welcoming Home. If you remember the letters that we used to find some of those hidden web pages at the top of the episode, there's a couple that I neglected to mention. If you put them in the order YXWVOE, you'll find an error page. But click the telephone, and suddenly we're treated to a rendition of the song Beautiful Dreamer.
Welcome to Starlight and drops are waiting for me.
In the world of Welcome Home, night symbolized the end of the episode. The neighbors would all go home, the children would turn off their TVs, and the crew would retire for the night. The show, however, has been off the air for a very long time, nearly 50 years. And so it's time for Home, the beautiful dreamer, to awaken once more. And we can be sure that this song is directed at Home, because while the song's currently labeled as singing MP3 in the files, the webpage is labeled duets. But there's only one person singing, or is there? If you listen a little further to the end of the song, we hear some banging sounds.
Do you like it?
If we we read Wally's bio, it says that Home talks using onomatopoeias. So these banging sounds are Home responding to Wally's song, slowly awakening, ready for revival. We don't exactly know what happened in 1974, what caused the show to shut down and the production company to fall silent, but I've seen my fair share of indie horror to know that when you got sentient mascots and demonic entities, it's not gonna be a good one. Maybe the production company fell silent because many of their workers were killed. Maybe a ton of children died. Maybe Wally was able to possess them through the TV to serve whatever Home's motivation is. Whatever happened back then, it is gonna happen again now that this exhibition is planned. Wally is regaining his influence, sharing these images to gather people together, and slowly he will reawaken Home to continue whatever their plan was half a century ago. The one thing I do know is that this story of Welcome Home has me hooked, especially when you consider that Clown has said that we're only 5% into the project. So until more is revealed, we wait. I suppose you could consider us the neighborhood watch. Let's just start with the big cliffhanger from the previous theory, the upcoming exhibition for Welcome Home. This event was a chance to share the history of the show with the world, but from the website's newsletter, it definitely seemed like something a lot more sinister. It read as follows, quote, "Together we will get it out. We will get everything out. You will see as we do, neighbor." Just gonna go and leave that invitation on red. Thank you very much. As I already mentioned, I suspected that this event was meant to gather people together to make them part of Wally's cult. So imagine my surprise when on the updated website, I saw that there was a brand new page dedicated to that very exhibition, and nothing really happened. Here I was, expecting images of destroyed displays, news articles of a disaster, maybe a message written on a wall in blood. That's not too much for a guy to ask, right? But instead, all I saw were vinyl records, an activity worksheet, a mock-up Wally puppet. I was wrong. No, something had to be off on this website. The main thing on the page was a short interview with the mysterious museum curator simply known as the Question Answerer. As they said on the exhibition page, quote, "I still have so many questions to answer here in the world of Welcome Home. You and me both there, QA, you and me both." Which means that it's time to do what you always do when you're stuck and need answers in an ARG, click anything and everything on the screen. And sure enough, my gut and brute force was right. There was actually something hidden here on the page. If you click the word answer from the Question Answerer quote I just read, you're taken to a page with a single image of a notebook. On this notebook, we see someone has been trying over and over again to find a password, but a password for what? Well, to find out, all you have to do is click the image, revealing a red safe with keys that represent the various characters from the series. Clicking again takes us to a blank guest area that requests a password. According to the notebook, the code is going to be 5 letters. And go figure, those worksheets from the exhibition also have 5 questions, with each answer being one of the residents of Home, lining up with the keys on the safe. Who's the funniest neighbor? Has to be the residential jokester Barnaby. Who shines brighter than any star? Sally Starlet. Who's the biggest chicken? Our knockoff Big Bird, Poppy. Which neighbor speaks to flowers? According to the character profiles, it's Julie. And who's your best friend? Well, that one there has to be our main character, Wally. And if we take the first letter from each answer, B, S, P, J, and W, and type all that in, we're rewarded with the staff-only page. And before I show it to you, let me just say that there is so much going on here, it is gonna burst your theorist brain. The page isn't like anything we've seen before. There's a bunch of text, but it's all at strange angles. The title's been copied so many times it's almost illegible. There's even some redacted text thrown in here for good measure. There's also a new group of photos that don't seem nearly as upbeat as the main site. And there we have it, my bloody walls. Can finally rest easy. But really, the image that grabbed my eye here was this one. An image of art supplies with a couple of no touching signs sticking out of the box. Hey, you don't tell me what I do or do not do sign. But in all seriousness, look at the note that's sitting on top of the pile of latex gloves. Put on gloves before handling any art. Call me if we run out. Those signs there aren't for visitors, they're for the staff. And it's important. I mean, you're not just writing 4 exclamation points there for no reason. In a later image, we find an email warning staff about a strange substance that's growing on the artwork. Quote, "If a substance begins to grow on anything delivered, please place it back in the box it was shipped in and return it to us at your leisure. If you or anyone in your team experiences nausea, dizziness, or fatigue, please don't be alarmed." Yeah, because when I touch something that suddenly makes me sick, my first response is clearly gonna be, this is totally fine. We can actually see the substance on the first image with the glove box. One of the gloves has actually been used and is covered with a paint-like goop, which matches what we see on the art pieces from the About Us page. The artwork is being delivered like this, and whatever's on it is not good for you. It seems connected to this line of secret text from the website's original FAQ page. Quote, "When I unwrapped the first letter, I felt it. I heard it. Open. open. I want it out. I'm going to get it out. It's not just making people sick, it's literally giving Wally an entry point. Seems that once you touch the paint, he can speak to you, indoctrinate you, brainwash you. In fact, it now appears to be happening to someone on the staff-only page. Here's the quote.
I had a dream when I began working on the Playfellow exhibition. Wally, darling, was sitting at the foot of my bed with a rotary phone in front of him, ringing away. It looked just like the little toy phone we were restoring for the exhibit. It kept ringing. Wally stared at me like he was waiting for me to pick up the phone, just staring, unblinking, the phone ringing and ringing. I couldn't move. I couldn't figure out how to move and pick up the phone. He kept waiting. I couldn't pick up the phone. I keep getting phone calls now, or at least I assume that's what's happening. I keep hearing it ringing all day sometimes. I check my phone, and there's no new messages.
The writer is being driven mad by the same substance, hearing the call of Wally and his cult of home. Just like you should be hearing my call of hitting that subscribe button. Just click the button to answer the phone in the next 5 seconds to make that ringing stop. Please make the ringing stop. Thanks, you're just the most. Now let's figure out what's going on with this note. The note goes on to talk about how they tore up the workspace to find the ringing, and that they pored over every recovery the Welcome Home Restoration Project has given me access to, including their website. Given that they're speaking about the organization in the third person, and they seem to be the one responsible for all the mess that we see backstage of the exhibit, it leads me to believe that this is the person put in charge of the whole thing, the question answerer. A professional exhibitor and museum curator who believes in our happy home just as much as we do. Actually saw their name pop up in the old website when I was doing my previous theory, but we didn't get much detail about them, so I kind of left them alone. But now, they seem to be playing a much more important role in the story, especially as it was their quote that led us to the staff page in the first place. The QA's been the one handling the artifacts. They've been getting everything set up, and in so doing, they've fallen victim to Wally's trap. What they've also done is tell us where we need to look next to keep our quest going. The question answer keeps referring to a telephone that Wally's holding, one that they can hear, but they dismiss the toy phone in the exhibit. Quote, all that was there were the toys for the exhibit, and obviously those couldn't be ringing. But I'm never quite so quick to dismiss any evidence that feels so overtly obvious. The telephone is prominently displayed at the exhibition as official merchandise for the Welcome Home show, and given there's now a merchandise page on the website, felt like the best place to go next. The merchandise page is full of holiday cards, vinyl records, cereals, and coloring books, but the biggest and most important thing they present to us right at the top of the page is the rotary phone. In fact, you can actually interact with this toy on the website. Pressing the buttons allows you to hear responses from the colorful cast of Welcome Home, just as you'd expect from a similar phone toy, except something isn't quite adding up. Despite the restoration project bringing the phone back to its original working condition, there seem to be some discrepancies between what we see and what the packaging tells us we should be seeing. The box tells us that there should be 16 built-in conversations in this thing, but that's spread across 10 buttons, 2 of which seem to be missing, and with 1 that's actively glitching. The remaining 7 only have 1 response, and they don't even remotely match what's said on the box.
Hello, this is Frank Frankly speaking. Hello. Are you there?
Which means that whatever phone they have, it is not the phone that we see on the box. Additionally, the Wally button doesn't have a play function. The website says his button has a glitch and has been taken offline. But as with most things involving Wally, things aren't exactly as they seem. If you click on the button anyway, you can definitely hear Wally's dialogue, but while all the others are responding awkwardly to a prank phone call, Wally's is a bit different.
Hello? 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 Ha ha ha, I'm only kidding. I know you're there. Did you like my joke? I think you were going to say yes. Ha ha.
It isn't an innocent pre-recorded conversation for a toy phone. This is targeted, and it's creepy. While all the others are responding to a prank call, Wally knows that we're there, and he speaks directly to us. Not about the show, to us, about us.
You have to go too. You have work to do. Remember, until you hear me again, keep your smile merry, and always know that I love you very much. Goodbye.
He's planning something big, and he needs his followers to keep up appearances until the time's right. This toy allows Wally to speak to his new followers directly, a shepherd to his flock, informing them of the work that's still to come. And while what he has in store is still unknown, he's still finding ways of keeping us busy. Before this update, one of the ways Wally communicated to us was through drawings in a guest book. By opening those up in a separate tab, we'd find hidden messages like, "I can hear you, neighbor." It was unsettling to be sure, but now he's back at it again. Only this this time he's doing it across the entire website. When you visit certain pages, you'll watch as Wally begins to draw something on the page before your very eyes. Clicking on each of these newly formed drawings takes you to an audio file, each one directly from Wally.
We've looked into each other's eyes so many times. You're looking at me now.
Once you find all the audio files, you can actually start to see a pattern. The pages the files are from all have single word titles, like soon, I, and neighbor. At first, this might seem random, but if you try to rearrange them, you can form the sentence, I will help you understand, neighbor. I will find a way soon. Which is super cool on its own, but it doesn't even stop there, because when you play the audio clips in the same order, they create one side of a conversation.
There you are. Welcome home. Ha ha ha. You're the most. You're so still. What are you doing? What are you waiting for? To hear me again? Ha ha ha. I think that means you can hear me. Can you see me? That's okay if you can't. Don't worry. I know you're there. You know I'm here too. I will talk to you. Why won't you answer me, neighbor? Why can't I hear you? You know me. You do. Please open. Let me in. Let me in.
This conversation feels like it's someone he's already converted, someone who's waiting to hear from him again, who desires to be a part of home. So who's he talking to? Well, it matches quite nicely with the note left behind by the question answerer on the staff-only page.
Wally stared at me like he was waiting for me to pick up the phone.
What are you waiting for? To hear me again? Ha ha ha.
I couldn't move. I couldn't figure out how to move and pick up the phone.
You're so still. What are you doing?
And suddenly it becomes clear why he's desperate for the question answerer's attention. Wally might be able to draw over the website, but to spread to more people, to become more powerful, Wally needs to be able to see.
You know how to draw eyes. You draw mine many times. I know it is thanks to you, neighbor, that I can see.
The Welcome Home Restoration Project tried to stop Wally and his influence by shutting down the guest book in this latest update. But underneath that news update is another post, not dated, that says, quote, so many guest signatures. So many of them are trying to communicate. What are you telling me for? Do you think I can answer? What are you trying to do to me? I'm closing that guest book. I'm not playing this game anymore. The ringing is enough. It's a reluctant follower. It's the question answerer. These eyes everywhere across the site will allow Wally to see into the real world and will help him interact with people on the other side. And the bad news is, it's working, as we see all over the behind-the-scenes photos on the staff-only page. One of the notes tells us about using a black light on all artwork, and for staff to take photos of what they find. Doing this reveals the drawings of eyes, spirals, telephones, phrases like the phone is ringing, all things that we've fairly well covered at this point. But how can we be sure that this is Wally's doing and not someone else? Well, on the emails requesting the 5-letter password that we found earlier, the email response is simply the worksheet. The email is to the question answerer, and the person it was sent to is from part of the WHRP, but their name's redacted. The question answerer prints out these pages after receiving the emails, but under the black light, written underneath everything, we find the identity of the sender, Wally, darling. Wally is signing in invisible ink. He's sending us down rabbit holes. He's providing letters, emails, and now passwords to a safe so that the WHRP can have more conversations with him. The puppet has become the master. However, while it might be easy to jump on the whole Wally is evil bandwagon, I believe that he may actually be just as much of a puppet as anyone else in this thing. In the last theory, I mentioned that there were 2 signatures from Wally in the guest book. One that looked normal, you're looking for me, silly, and another that felt a bit more chaotic, you won't write back. This led me to believe that there may be 2 versions of Wally wandering around, one good and one evil. This update seems to be pointing us in a similar direction. In the email that was sent by WHRP that talks about the substance causing nausea, dizziness, and fatigue, we find a note written in invisible ink that says, I'm so sorry. Wally's apologizing? But isn't this exactly what he wants? To brainwash others to see as he does? It doesn't make a lot of sense, unless there are 2 versions of Wally. On the original website, there was a secret page that showed Wally hiding in shadows, followed by the text, I can't see you. Do you see me? In one of the audio clips we found this time, he says,
it is thanks to you, neighbor, that I can see, but it is still, I can't see.
Wally being able to see or not see is one of the big recurring phrases across the website. So how come he suddenly breaks mid-conversation and then all of a sudden is struggling to speak and says that he can't see anything? Maybe it's not that there are two Wallys, but rather one Wally with two different sides inside of him. Eyes have always been used to represent Wally, but they've often been accompanied by spirals. We see them throughout the blacklight images, but there was also a spiral beneath home on the old website. Well, if we look at that spiral now, it's grown, it's bigger, and now there's an eye inside of that spiral. The So Below page now reveals a spiral that, when clicked, gives us a recording of home talking in noise. Those noises can actually be translated from Morse code to say hello. Spirals are the signature of home. Eyes are the signature for Wally. And now they're becoming one and the same. They're mixing with each other. Home is controlling Wally. On page 6 of the guest book, we see Wally's written his name, but if you open the image in a new tab, the image is called Our Name. R, as in plural ownership. Two beings inhabiting one body. Wally and home, which explains why Wally contradicts himself mid-sentence. It's his good half, his real half, fighting back, trapped inside his own body, unable to see, barely able to communicate. But with what time he has, he's begging us to stay quiet, to not fall for home's tricks. And he's not the only one that feels trapped here either. There appears to be someone else onto Wally's schemes, someone who's working from the inside, undercover, trying to track down the cult's behavior and bring the whole operation down. One thing I didn't expect when logging back into the Welcome Home website post-update was the sheer amount of bugs across the site. And no, I'm not talking about broken links or buttons that don't work, I'm talking literal bugs crawling around the website. These colorful little critters appear on nearly every page, and at first I thought it was just a little extra design flair, adding some movement to an otherwise static page. But then I noticed this particular part of the most recent newsletter. Quote, "Please excuse those pesky bugs, dear neighbor. What is a beautiful home without a pest or two? We will do our best to keep things neat, tidy, and organized." I mean, they might as well have just said "do not touch" in giant red letters. So of course, I'ma touch it. When you do, you're met with something completely new to the series. A video. A video that opens another side of the story that Wally, Home, and the Restoration Project do not want people to hear. So let's take a look for ourselves, shall we? We don't get a lot visually from the videos themselves. They appear to be our neighborhood characters interacting with each other. The conversations seem to be very trivial on the surface. Sally wants Poppy to bake a cake, Howdy is talking about his family back home with Barnaby, and Eddie and Julie play make-believe games. Nothing's really happening, but we know better. Looking at the details here, you start to notice that the conversations are happening off in the background, meaning that whatever perspective we're seeing this from, it's not the character that we hear. So whose perspective are we in, and why are we watching? Well, you don't have to wait long to get your answer. At the end of each and every video, one of the characters addresses Wally, and as they say his name, the audio distorts and the visuals cut out.
I'm sure we can come up with a wonderful joke between the three of us. Isn't that right?
Next time, don't give Eddie any hints, eh, Wall? I didn't see you there. What can I get you for you today, Wall?
In fact, in some clips, we actually see Wally's hand in the shot. We are watching from Wally's perspective. He is the lens that we're seeing the world through. Except he's not interacting. He's just sitting there, quietly, completely still, observing. He's going from place to place, keeping a close eye on all his neighbors. Spying on his neighbors, if you will. If we're right and Wally is supposed to be some kind of a cult leader, then this makes a lot of sense. As the shepherd for his flock, he needs to make sure that everyone's under control. No one's stepping out of line. By the looks of it, something rotten seems to be happening under the surface of this idyllic kids TV series. In one of the hidden videos, Sally Starlet makes a snide comment to Poppy about someone using gelatin molds for all their baking.
There's no one else in the neighborhood I would trust with this. And not just because you're the only one here who can make something that doesn't come out of a gelatin mold.
And we learn that this is a dig at the local bookworm Frank Frankly, based on a similar conversation in a different video.
I suppose gelatin can't always be relied upon, too. Still, I think it holds perfectly sliced fruit beautifully.
People are gossiping. They're making comments about others when they're not present. And they don't just stop at gossiping either. Barnaby mentions having tomatoes thrown at him by another neighbor in a different bit of audio.
As long as they're not throwing tomatoes at me, it sounds like a walk in the park. I tell you, we got a neighbor who's got an arm like a professional baseball player. It's not easy.
This again feels like a call out to Frank Frankly, who has himself a vegetable patch in the back garden. In fact, there's a lot of weirdness around Frank in general, which we'll come back to in a minute. In general, though, people in this neighborhood are feeling a lot of tension, and most of it's revolving around the resident jokester and Wally's best friend, Barnaby, who seems to clash with almost everyone he speaks to. While Frank is teaching Wally about flowers, Barnaby comes in to create a big disruption.
Hey, not a daisy goes by where you don't get impatient. But hey, I'm just pulling your leg.
Will you just get out out of here! Go find an audience for your silly gags somewhere else.
Barnaby also chases down Eddie the mailman because he wants his delivery, even though Eddie says it's against the rules.
I have to put it in your mailbox, it's policy!
And Barnaby just straight up bullies Julie after she tries to tell a joke.
What did the number 3 say to the number 2 after beating him in a game of checkers?
Oh no, here he comes.
I won!
That was just doggone terrible.
But then there's the final video. It is wildly different from everything else we've seen so far. Unlike the other bugs that appear on the normal pages of the website, this bug is found on a hidden page, the WOXYVE page from the Welcome Home pre-update. In case you don't remember, this was one in a series of hidden pages that you could discover by finding misplaced letters in the text sprinkled across the website. This particular page shows scripts from the original Welcome Home TV show, but now there's been a bug added, a real bug hiding under the pages. Click it and we find a video of Barnaby talking, just like all the other videos, but this time he's not talking to another character, instead he's talking to Home, telling him all the things that he did that day. In his talk, Barnaby calls back to all the other clips, like annoying Frank, bullying Julie, chasing down Eddie.
Yeah, he's a real sourpuss. No wonder Julie can't tell a good joke. She's got a sense of humor only Frank could love.
Just like in all the other videos, Barnaby calls over to Wally, but this time, the video doesn't immediately end.
Go on, kid, tell him. Hello, buddy? Pal? Hey, you stopped baiting. Everything all right?
Did you hear that? Just before the video glitches out, we hear a number of banging and creaking sounds all coming from Home. It's Home talking back. And if we look at the transcript, we actually get a translation to tell us how Home is feeling. Sounds of banging can be heard, sort of like laughter. Opens and closes its door judgmentally. We're being helped along to understand how Home feels. And given the judgmental lines are focused around what Barnaby sees as fun, I'm not convinced that Home is happy. And most disturbingly of all, in those final moments, the bangs and creaks are left unaccounted for. There's no transcript, no translation. Why? Because the truth is purposely being hidden from us. I believe that this right here is the moment that Wally is taken over by Home. Until now, Wally has simply been a faithful servant to Home, doing as it says, being its eyes and ears. But after hearing how the neighborhood's been miserable, Home decided it needed to take matters into its own hands, taking full control of Wally like the puppet that he is. But there was still something that felt odd to me. So far, Wally/Home is the only one that we've seen communicating to us through the glitches in the website, but this suddenly blows the roof off their whole charade, revealing the truth that they don't want us to know, that they are one and the same. So why would they choose to show it to us on the website? Well, what if I told you it's not them? There's someone else uploading these videos to the site. There's someone else working from the inside to take Wally down. Consider this. The way these videos have been seeded out to us, the audience, is completely different to how Wally's been speaking to us through this website so far. Wally draws on the website to get our attention, but these videos are being revealed by literal bugs crawling across the site. So if Wally draws because he's an artist, then is there a character that's associated with bugs? The answer there is a resounding yes. One of the character's descriptions reads as follows, quote, "The resident bookworm with an expertise on butterflies." A description that belongs to none other than Frank Frankly. This guy loves butterflies. He even wears a butterfly-shaped bow tie to prove it. But he isn't limited to just one type of insect either. Eddie calls on him for help when an insect gets into his post office.
I'm afraid I only deal with bugs, Mr. Deer.
Bug? A critter, a guest, a neighbor, whatever it is, it's upheaving my whole post office.
The most damning of all is that on the merchandise page, there's a letter from Frank to Wally talking about an insect that he saw and a picture explaining the legs of the bug, a bright and colorful insect that looks exactly like the insects that we've been clicking on throughout the video. If there's an insect, Frank is involved, which means that these videos are coming from him. It is Frank trying to talk to us. And it's clear that he knows the truth about what's going on when you take a closer look at the videos taking place in his garden. Frank is the only one with a vegetable patch, as seen from the neighborhood page, but the garden isn't quite right. There's a rotting tomato just lying there, and Frank acknowledges it in one of the clips.
They just won't leave my tomatoes alone, and who am I to shoo them away?
But it's just left there for us to stare at, this sign of decay. Just like Wally, Frank here is painting us a picture. He's telling us that life since joining the cult isn't all it's cracked up to be. There's a sign of decay inside. There's something corrupt in the middle of this otherwise pristine looking place. In fact, in multiple clips, he's suspicious of the true nature of basically everyone around him.
I doubt you're any sort of beagle. I've never seen any blue dog before in my life.
Frank knows the neighborhood, Barnaby, Howdy, and Home are not what they seem on the surface. In fact, he's afraid of them. In that same video clip of the vegetable garden, we see a lineup of these colorful things. If there are any professional gardeners out there that want to tell me exactly what they are and what their name is, I'd appreciate it because I wasn't able to find it, but to me, they seem very humanoid. We see 8 standing up in a line and then one opposite them upside down with its head buried. 9 people in total. And then remind me again how many neighbors there are. Poppy, Barnaby, Julie, Frank, Howdy, Eddie, Sally, Wally, and Home. 9. These are our neighbors. But then who's this one with his head buried and why? My mind immediately went to the phrase burying your head in the sand, refusing to think about unpleasant or negative things. If this is Frank's garden, it's likely that this has been put together by Frank. So maybe Frank knows the truth and is denying it? No, if he was denying it, he wouldn't be reaching out to us through the website. It would make more sense for this one to be Wally, denying that there's anything wrong in the neighborhood to begin with. Or maybe it is symbolic of Frank hiding from the neighborhood because he knows the truth. He's now trying to tell us without being seen by everyone else because he's worried what the neighbors will do to him if he gets caught. Sadly though, it might be too late. On the staff only page, there's a framed photo that has a note from the question answerer, the curator that's putting together this entire Welcome Home exhibit. It says, quote, "This art was not part of the shipment. Please stop using the work printer to prank me." But underneath the actual photo, written in invisible ink, are the words, "Who are you?" with an eye and a spiral. Last episode, we discussed how the eye represents Wally and the spiral represents Home, the two working together. And the invisible ink is one of the ways that they communicate with the outside world. For it to grab both Wally and QA's attention, it's gotta be an important detail, right? And while the image itself is quite dark, I felt like I recognized it from somewhere. Then it hit me. The QA says that it's not part of the shipment or original assets, and there's one place where Welcome Home assets exist that aren't being considered canon by the fanbase: Clown's portfolio page. Sure enough, when I took a look, there was a high-res version of this exact image, and it shows our new helper, Frank Frankly. The image is a weird one. He's surrounded by his own body parts, arms, hands, eyes, and in the center of the photo, we see Frank holding a mysterious red square. But these hands aren't like his usual ones. The number of fingers don't actually match up. Yep, it's like the good old days of FNAF, my friends. We're counting fingers and toes before anyone becomes a robot. Anyway, like the other puppets, he typically has 3 fingers and a thumb, but this image shows him with 4 regular fingers, with the thumb hidden behind the card that he's holding. These are human hands. I did think it was odd that Wally wrote under the photo, "Who are you?" I mean, it's clearly Frank's face. Wally knows who this is. He's one of the neighbors. But paired with the image of Frank having human hands, this question sounds slightly different. It's not "who are you?" It's "who are you really?" And going back through the information that we have on Frank, suddenly him being the odd one out becomes abundantly clear. The description pages tell us how each character came into the neighborhood. All of them except for Frank. Frank's description actually reads, quote, "Frank does not have any known information regarding his origins prior to moving into Home when compared to the others. How he got into the neighborhood is just as much of a mystery to the WHRP as it is to us. He's hiding his identity to take things down from the inside." In the photo, Frank has all these extra body parts around him. I suspect that all these spare parts are things he uses to disguise himself in order to break Wally and Home's little cult open from the inside. When talking to Wally about the flowers and Barnaby interrupts, Frank puts emphasis on a very specific word.
Don't actually have any blue pigmentation. They have to grow in soil that is basic as well, so the pine straw should be left for the other beds.
You're telling me that these flowers are liars, Frankie?
I'm not telling you that these flowers are liars, Barnaby.
Frank isn't trying to tell Barnaby about these lying flowers. He's trying to tell someone else. It could be Wally. We know he's the perspective that we're seeing here. Maybe he's trying to reason with his good side. Or maybe this is his way of breaking the fourth wall, talking directly to us. When Frank is saying these flowers aren't as they seem, we're being shown the people standing together and the one representing Frank having his head buried in the sand. And what color is Frank's representation? Blue. He's telling us that he isn't what he appears to be. He's not a puppet from this neighborhood. He's a spy on the inside. This same photo of Frank with the human hands on Clown's Tumblr account has the hashtag scopophobia. Scopophobia is an extreme or irrational fear of being looked at or seen. Frank is afraid that he's going to be seen for what he truly is, but wants us to know the truth about this neighborhood, so he buries his head in the sand and hides messages through his trusty bugs. I have no doubt in the future updates we'll learn more about Frank and how exactly he became part of the neighborhood. I just hope that he's able to stay under the radar for long enough to tell us the truth.
There's someone else from the neighborhood that's been using the bugs on the website to expose Home's plan. The local bug enthusiast and resident grump, Frank Frankly. But now, after all this time, the internet darling, Wally darling, is back. And he's got a shiny new website in celebration of home warming, which is Welcome Home's version of Christmas in March. So, as you can tell, things are already not adding up, which means there's likely going to be a bunch of brand new lore waiting for us in the neighborhood. So, even though it's spring, wrap up warm, get a hot cup of cocoa, and join me, neighbor, as we uncover the secrets behind this new website and spread the holiday cheer for all to hear. For all to hear. For all to First of all, when I say shiny new website, I really do mean it. This isn't just an update. The old website has been taken down and a new one has been rebuilt in its place in order to get rid of all those pesky bugs, glitches, and files. There are these weird new doodles around the website, but I clicked on them and nothing happened, so it seems like this reboot was a success. Other than that, the website seems relatively similar to the old one, outside of the new Christmassy themes. But if you take a look at the news section, there's a newsletter that tells us all about the new stuff they have over on the merchandise page. So I guess that's where we're going next. And they really weren't lying. This is by far the biggest part of the update. There are audio files from Welcome Home commercials, songs sung by members of the neighborhood, including Wally's tone-deaf rendition of the song Toyland by Doris Day. There's even children's toys that contain actual throwing knives and an unsettling cookbook full of disturbing recipes that I am definitely going to be sending over to Santi later. But there was one new addition that stood out to me above all the rest. Yes, even those deadly weapons. And that was the Crispy Sweets Frosted Cereal Box. More specifically, the back of the cereal box. We see our reliable mailman Eddie Deer holding a decoder ring, encouraging us to make or break secret codes. Call it a hunch? I think that might be a clue. This decoder ring uses pictures that correlate with the letters of the alphabet. And if you've been paying attention, these pictures are the exact same as the ones we've been seeing scattered around the website. Ha! I knew those random doodles weren't just random doodles. So of course, I scoured every page and found every last one of them. Now all we have to do is figure out what this jumble of letters is supposed to say. I managed to find the words away from prying eyes, but I was left with a handful of letters that at first I just couldn't figure out. That wasn't until I remembered that this is a web-based ARG. These letters aren't words, they're part of a URL. 3 W's at the start and the TNE spelling out the domain. .net, giving us the website www.awayfrompryingeyes.net. And sure enough, type that into your search bar and we're taken to a brand new website. This site contains the writings from a member of the WHRP, gathering evidence of all the weird glitches from the old website, trying to figure out what's going on. Going down the page, we can see that the writer is named W, which feels suspicious given the only character we know with W as the first letter of their name is Wally. However, we don't really get anything more to go on, so I'm just gonna leave that be for now, but make no mistake, I'm watching you. Regardless, I started reading what W had to say, and as I did, it occurred to me that we've actually met this character before. In this post, W notes his frustration. Quote, "No one has come forward or provided leads, and dead ends have since piled up," which lines up with a quote from a newsletter that was posted during a minor update back in October, the Halloween update, where again, the writer is very vocal about the lack of information. Our source has yet to send the full book. I don't understand why. What is it worth to leave it out? Ripping out pages. What a waste. It takes so long to get everything off of them. Still, we're patient, aren't we? If you're reading this, please hurry. So, it would appear that W is the one writing the newsletters. But those aren't the only writings of theirs that we've seen before. Remember on the original website where we found text that said things like, "When I unwrapped the first letter, I felt it. I heard it. Open, open, open. I want it out. I'm going to get it out." Well, the same kind of writing style can be seen from W on this new hidden website. It needed me. I needed it. Everyone started to look at us. You want this as badly as I do. Up until now, we've suspected that these hidden entries on the old website were written by the question answerer, the museum curator that was hired to put on the Playfellow exhibition. They created their own hidden website that would tell us about a dream they had with Wally sat at the foot of their bed calling them on a toy telephone. He was the only one acting erratically, so at the time, it made sense that he would be the one making these chaotic entries. But now, W's writing seems to be a much stronger match. Plus, it would make way more sense for a member of the WHRP to be able to alter the main website rather than a freelance museum curator. W even references the question answer and the events that we saw in the last update. Nothing from our curator who has since recovered. I don't know what happened to them to become so unwell, to create that page. Things clearly got a lot worse for our curator friend between updates. But despite knowing about the website and what it said about the telephone, W decided to grab the defective toy anyway and continue trying to fix it after the exhibition. We can see a page labeled broken phone that contains their findings, and we learn that no matter what W tries, the phone is still doing the same thing it was for the question answerer. It won't stop ringing. When they pick it up, it doesn't give them an answer either, until it does. What we hear is Wally's terrible cover of the song Toyland, only this time there are lines from Wally talking at the beginning and the end.
Did you like it? I wish I knew, but you still won't tell me anything.
Wally is still using the phone to communicate to whoever is on the other end. But unlike last time with the question answerer, I don't think this is the side of Wally controlled by home. Listen to what Wally says before hanging up.
Everyone's usually so busy. so it's just me and home for a long while. I don't want to end this call.
That line, "I don't want to end this call," to me, sounds like desperation. Wally says that he's alone with Home, and he doesn't sound excited, because with no one else around, Home can take control and carry out the next part of his plan.
But I have to go get ready for home warming.
Home warming is the next part of Home's scheme to keep the neighborhood in line and indoctrinate more people into this cult. And we can see this plan in action if we head on over to the second piece of evidence from this new secret site named Commercials. On this page, W tells us they managed to somehow find snippets of the actual Welcome Home TV show playing on their old TV. Previous entries on the old website talked about how no one seems to remember the show, and despite having a bunch of merch, they had no evidence the actual TV show existed. So this is a huge deal. At least it would be if W had actually managed to record any of it. Dude, you had one job. Though I shouldn't give them too hard a time. They seem to recognize their mistake, and so from this point onwards, they leave the TV on, constantly watching, hoping the show would return to the screen. Until finally, he found something. Quote, "I was finally rewarded in December. The channel it appeared on didn't make any sense, but I didn't care. Video evidence and audio started playing one after the other. I've captured and compiled together whatever I could. When footage would disappear, I would have to move to another channel, where another would appear and then disappear again. This explains why a Christmas-themed update seems to be happening in March. The newsletter that told us about the new merchandise is actually labeled December 25th, Christmas Day. But immediately after that, a new newsletter is released calling it a mistake. Quote, I hadn't realized how much time had passed. This update was planned for December, but they were so engrossed with these commercials, so determined to record evidence that they lost track of time and ended up staring at this TV for months. To the point they even claim that things in their house have started rotting. But it was worth it, because now, after a year of the website talking about a show that didn't seem to exist, W finally had video evidence of Welcome Home, and what has been uncovered is harrowing. This video is mostly filled with commercials, advertising things like cereal, sleeping pills, and cigarettes. Ah yes, a balanced breakfast for any child growing up in the 70s. I'm making a joke about it, but back then, advertising this sort of thing with animated characters was pretty normal.
Gee, we ought to do something, Fred. Okay? How's about taking a nap? I got a better idea. Let's take a Winston break. That's it!
However, morally questionable adverts aren't the only thing this video includes. W laments that the original show they saw never reappeared again, except for a couple of clips from the perspective of a character we've not actually spent a lot of time with. Compared to the likes of Wally, Frank, or Barnaby, he felt like a bit of a background character, but now he seems to be taking center stage, showing us that decoder ring that got us started on this whole journey. I'm talking about Welcome Home's reliable mailman, Eddie Deer. In these clips, we see Eddie wondering why no one asked him to deliver anything, and so, to pass the time, he starts wrapping presents for his friends, but constantly begins to doubt his choices. If no one is trusting him with the mail, are his choices even good enough?
Well, no one has asked me to deliver nothing yet. Let's wrap Sally's presents first. Or actually, maybe Julie's. She's gonna love this chimney cozy I got her. I mean, I hope she does. Well, come to think of it, Julie hasn't called me either.
All of this eventually leads to frustration. He slams the desk and throws things around because he feels useless and alone.
How am I supposed to do my job when no one gives me something to do?
Poor guy. Just give the man something to deliver. It's all he has. But these clips highlight something that has been bubbling away under the surface of Welcome Home pretty much since the beginning. Eddie is an outcast. In our last theory, we showed that the interactions between the neighbors are not as harmonious as they seem. But looking more closely, you realize that out of all of them, Eddie is the one that is most often mistreated, insulted, or taken advantage of. When Eddie is talking to Howdy about what he's doing that day, Howdy just waves him off.
Just in a rush today. I'm a little behind with my delivery run.
You don't say. You have a good one too, Ed. Boy, that fella can talk your ear off.
Barnaby chases him down the street demanding his delivery, and in a secret video from the Halloween update, Sally is talking about a famous performer. Eddie recalls that same performer, and Sally says,
Even the mailman gets it.
Even the mailman gets it, as if he's somehow lesser. Clearly, the town thinks very little of Eddie, but there's something else that stood out to me. Why is there no mail? It's the holiday season, surely there's something for Eddie to deliver. Even when the neighbors are being mean to him in those previous videos, he's still going around delivering mail. Hence, Barnaby is even able to chase him down the street. So where has all the mail gone? Well, do you guys remember the guest book from the original Welcome Home website? The one that had all those reaction drawings from Wally that helped us figure out he was talking to us. And do you remember what greeted us before we entered that guest book? A colorful envelope, a pixel art version of Eddie Deer, and an image telling you to visit the guest book next to another image of Eddie. Eddie is associated with the guest book, almost as if he's responsible for delivering those messages. But what you might also remember is that back in July, the guest book was closed in order to stop Wally from interacting with us. us. Quote, "I'm closing the guest book. I'm not playing this game anymore. The ringing is enough." You could still see the guest book, but you were no longer able to submit new entries. There were no new messages to pass on, no new letters to deliver. And that's why, come home warming, Eddie has run out of stuff to deliver because the well of fan interactions has dried up, meaning he's out of a job and now he's starting to crack. And that is exactly what home wants. This video continues with the residents all heading to home for the home warming party. Eddie sits in an armchair and the narrator says,
"Eddie dear was happy. Eddie dear was happy."
But as the line is repeated, Eddie's face begins to sweat. He looks concerned. The audio begins to build until suddenly there's silence. Eddie looks at his plate, a plate that holds a single pea. That's pretty weird, but this quote-unquote meal is featured on the last page of the Welcome Home cookbook as a certified showstopper, and at the bottom of the recipe is a note. Having a get-together? Consider inviting more peas to the party. Add additional peas according to how many guests there are. Take care not to place them too close together. The peas aren't just peas. They are representations of the neighbors from home, just like the pegs were in the last update, and it's telling us to have them all separated rather than together. Up until now, we believe that home wasn't happy about the neighbors constantly fighting each other. But the more I look at this pea on a plate, the more I wonder if that's actually what home wants. Home doesn't want any of them too friendly or close. Why? Because it offers them the perfect opportunity for control. In this video, Eddie looks up to find himself alone in a black void, with home staring right back at him. A scene that looks awfully familiar to the one we found underneath home on the old website. A black void with Wally worshipping home as home's eye is staring at him. What follows are the sounds of Eddie struggling, his heartbeat racing, he clutches the arms of the chair, his vision begins to blur until we are snapped back into the party with Frank and Sally talking to Eddie. Exactly like what happens to Wally during the Halloween update. We've known for a while that Wally is under the control of home, and so this new video is showing us that he isn't the only one. Eddie has also fallen into home's grasp. Earlier in this video, we even played a clip that shows Wally feeling isolated and alone.
Everyone's usually so busy, so it's just me and home for a long while.
That is home's tactic. Get the neighbors alone, disenfranchise them with the neighborhood, and take control. We see the idea repeated in Wally's rendition of Toyland.
While you dwell within it, you are ever happy there. Once you pass its borders, you can never return again.
While Eddie was living in the neighborhood, just dwelling, he was happy. But the moment he saw the neighborhood wasn't all it was cracked up to be, passing its borders, he's gone too far. He can't go back to pretending everything is fine. Eddie feels like he's not wanted in the neighborhood. He's becoming separated from the group. So much so that he is the only one to not have any home warming decorations on his post office. And thanks to the lack of mail from the guest book, he's become isolated, lacking purpose, making him the perfect puppet. And remember, the only reason he has no mail is because Wally, home's first puppet, was responding to the guest book, which forced W to shut it down. Home has been playing 4D chess this whole time, and we had no idea. Home is using W to take control of the neighborhood, the WHRP, and the world. Eddie being under Home's control also explains why W hasn't received any updates since Christmas. The WHRP always said all the information found on this website was extracted from documents that had been uncovered in brightly colored envelopes. Colored envelopes have always been associated with Eddie. He delivers all mail to and from home in these colorful envelopes, which means he was always helping Wally to send these letters from the start. But now, Eddie isn't collecting or sending mail anymore. He's working for home. But hope is not lost. Frank frankly is seen at the end of this video talking to Eddie.
Mr. Dear? Mr. Dear, are you listening?
But when Eddie isn't responding, Frank becomes more concerned. He stops addressing Eddie as Mr. Dear and starts whispering his first name. As we discussed last time, Frank is the man on the inside. He was the one we found on the Question Answerer secret website in a picture that showed him with human hands surrounded by his own body parts. He is using these to disguise himself and uncover the cult at the center of the neighborhood. And now he's using the bugs and secret videos to help us realize that horrible truth. As Eddie can barely get a word out during this encounter, it seems like Frank is aware of what's happening to him. He's becoming another puppet for Home's game, and so he's trying to help him break away. Each time Frank says Eddie's name,
name, Eddie's vision becomes clearer. Kind of like how in the secret videos we found by clicking Frank's bugs, we see Wally's vision begin to glitch out when his name is mentioned. These videos are from Frank, so he knows that saying their names, expressing concern and building those connections, it can disconnect them from home. But he does it in whispers so the rest of the neighbors, and especially Wally, can't hear him. Again, the other neighbors don't know that Frank isn't who he says he is, so he's being secretive in what he's doing while trying to help Eddie out best he can. But as we've discussed, W hasn't received any new mail since Christmas, which means this fix is likely only temporary. And with 2 out of 8 members of the neighborhood under Holmes' control, it's only a matter of time before the rest of the town succumb to Holmes' plan. And if Home has their way, we'll all be joining them down in the void very soon.
And boy, was I right about that last bit. This is your holiday gift, everyone. Time for a bit of a mini theory. Because since then, the website has received another update for this year's Halloween. The real website remained largely the same. The only thing that was new was the introduction of a new recording called Brick by Brick, along with a physical book so that you can read along. Most of it is your standard Sesame Street style story. Sally is putting together another scary play. Even Home wants to be in it, but sadly, they are rejected as Sally wants Poppy to be the star. Trust me, Sally, you do not want a Poppy being your main character. It never ends well. Fortunately, Poppy is far too frightened to do it and so declines, leaving an opening for Home to take her place. Though concerned that Poppy might still hear the scary play from her house, the neighbors do the only logical thing. They brick up her window so that she can be alone in peace. With friends like these, who needs enemies? By the end of the story, we do lose the audio, so we just have to read by ourselves. But all's well that ends well, and Wally ends up saying, everything is as it should be. But as you'd expect, this lovely story has more story to tell. One that has been kept away from prying eyes. That's right, though the main website is mostly the same, our secret website run by W has undergone some more interesting alterations. Some are small changes that focus on W's tracking of someone that was responding in the guest book, the secret messages we found in Wally's drawings. But the real change comes with the addition of the Brick by Brick audiobook. Although W points out the large number of differences between the text of the book and the audio they received. Most notably, it contains the part of the audio that cut out in the original tape, though it doesn't seem to match what we read in the storybook. As Poppy is left alone in her home, we start to hear sounds of wood scraping and a knock on the door. Poppy, frightened, says the door is open, but the knocks grow louder, a doorknob is frantically turned, and Poppy descends into madness.
Open the door! Open the door!
We hear Sally asking if Poppy is okay, and as Poppy comes to, she once again says she couldn't get out. Suddenly, we hear Frank.
You're out! The door's open. Why don't you open the door?
This sounds very similar to what happened to Eddie Deer at the end of the last episode. Eddie was isolated from the rest of the neighborhood, and that was when Home took control of Eddie. Now, Home's onomatopoeic sounds are showing up again when Poppy is isolated and afraid in order to take control. We even see this represented in the storybook. Sally tries to cast Poppy in the play, but Home ends up taking her place. Home takes over as Poppy. And as we're listening to Poppy's breakdown, the page of the storybook just shows Wally saying, everything is as it should be. Wally, Home's faithful servant, is revealing that this was all part of the plan, that everything is as it should be. Everyone should be isolated and become part of Home. Frank is coming in with a whisper, trying to calm them down and save them, bringing them back to reality without Wally darling noticing. But Frank needs to up his game, and fast, if he's going to save everyone. With each new update, we are seeing a member of the neighborhood become isolated and taken over by Home. First with Eddie, and now with Poppy. If Frank insists on staying under the radar like this, Julie, Sally, Howard, and Barnaby will all be succumbing to Home's evil plans very soon. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory! Thanks for watching, and happy holidays, neighbor. But if you're still wanting more lore, answer the call and click the link on screen to watch our video of the complete lore of Minecraft. Why won't you answer me, neighbor?